At 11:11 a.m., the warning reached Washington before confirmation reached certainty. A message crossed secure lines carrying a single implication: the balance might be breaking. No announcement followed, no sirens, only a quiet shift in posture among those who understood what the message meant. If the Cold War turned hot tonight, there would be no warning for the world. For decades, the Cold War existed as a promise of violence rather than its execution. A war defined by restraint, threat, and calculation. But on this night, restraint was no longer guaranteed, and calculation was being replaced by urgency. The Cold War was never truly cold. It was a constant test of nerves, fought through intelligence reports, proxy wars, and military exercises designed to signal strength without crossing lines. Every movement was watched, every silence interpreted. And sometimes interpretation was wrong. The message that arrived that night did not declare war. It suggested something more dangerous: preparation. Troop movements, elevated readiness, unusual activity along strategic corridors. None of it proved intent. All of it demanded attention. In Cold War doctrine, preparation was often indistinguishable from provocation. What one side called defense, the other could read as the opening move of an attack. This ambiguity was not a flaw in the system, it was the system. Inside American command structures, analysts began assembling fragments into patterns. No single report caused alarm, but together they formed a picture that could not be ignored. History had taught them that wars rarely announce themselves clearly. The danger was not certainty. The danger was momentum. Once preparations began on one side, the other was pressured to respond, not because war was inevitable, but because delay could be fatal if it was. Fear did not need proof. It needed plausibility. Military exercises had always been a part of the Cold War rhythm. But this night felt different. The scale was larger. The timing was unusual. The signals overlapped in ways analysts struggled to dismiss as coincidence. Routine was starting to look like rehearsal. At senior levels, discussions shifted quietly from observation to contingency. What if this was not signaling? What if restraint had finally failed? These questions were not asked aloud. They did not need to be. The Cold War's greatest danger was never hatred. It was miscalculation. Leaders on both sides believed war would be catastrophic, but they also believed losing the ability to respond would be worse. This logic trapped decision-makers inside a narrowing corridor, and the corridor was closing. As reports continued to arrive, American forces adjusted readiness levels. Nothing dramatic, nothing public, but enough to be noticed by those watching from the other side. Every defensive move risked becoming a provocation. Across oceans and borders, similar calculations were taking place. Each side believed it was reacting responsibly. Each side feared being too late. The Cold War was becoming dangerously symmetrical. Communication channels existed, but trust did not. Messages could be sent, but interpretation could not be controlled. A reassurance intended to calm could just as easily confirm suspicion. Silence was often safer than explanation. By early morning hours, senior military planners were no longer asking if escalation was possible. They were asking how fast it could unfold if it began. Speed, once again, became the enemy of restraint. The Cold War had balanced on fear for decades. Now, fear was beginning to move on its own. In Part 2, a single military exercise will push both sides closer to confrontation and reveal how easily preparation can be mistaken for intent. The exercise was supposed to be routine, scheduled months in advance, documented through official channels, and framed as a defensive readiness drill. On paper, it followed the Cold War script precisely. In reality, timing changed everything. Military exercises in the Cold War were never just training. They were messages, signals, demonstrations of capability disguised as preparation. The problem was not what the exercise involved, but how it could be interpreted when fear was already rising. The scale of the exercise exceeded expectations. More units participated than usual. Strategic forces were included. Command structures activated at higher levels than analysts were accustomed to seeing during peacetime drills. To one side, it meant readiness. To the other, it looked like rehearsal. Intelligence reports struggled to draw clean lines. Satellite imagery showed movement. Intercepts suggested elevated coordination. Logistics chains activated at speeds typically reserved for crises. None of it proved intent. All of it suggested capability. Capability was the most dangerous signal of all. A nation does not need to declare war to create fear. It only needs to demonstrate that it could act quickly and decisively. In Cold War logic, capability created obligation. American planners understood this instinctively. They had built the same signals into their own doctrine. Exercises were meant to deter, but deterrence worked both ways. What restrained one side could accelerate the other. The mirror was uncomfortable. As the exercise unfolded, analysts began tracking deviations. Units moved slightly faster than expected. Communication patterns shifted. Strategic assets were brought online earlier than normal. Small differences, but Cold War history was written in small differences. The question no one wanted to ask began to surface quietly. What if this was not an exercise? What if preparation had crossed the invisible line into initiation without anyone explicitly deciding to do so? Doctrine offered no easy answer. Cold War strategy assumed rational actors who communicated intent clearly, but exercises blurred intent by design. They lived in the space between threat and reassurance, and that space was becoming crowded. In response, American forces adjusted posture again. Readiness increased incrementally. Commands reviewed contingency plans. Communication lines tightened. Each step felt reasonable. Each step narrowed the margin. From the outside, both sides appeared to be escalating simultaneously. Inside, Both believed they were reacting defensively. Neither believed they were provoking. This symmetry was the Cold War's most lethal feature. As hours passed, restraint depended less on policy and more on perception. Did the other side still see this as signaling, or had fear already rewritten the narrative? No intelligence report could answer that. The exercise continued, and with every phase completed, it became harder to reverse course without appearing weak. Momentum, once again, began to act independently of intention. The Cold War was starting to move under its own weight. At senior command levels, contingency discussions hardened. Not plans for war, but plans for responding to the possibility that war had already begun elsewhere. The distinction was thin, and getting thinner. By the time the exercise entered its final phase, something had changed. What began as preparation now carried the emotional weight of inevitability. In Part 3, a single misread signal will push both sides to the edge and force leaders to decide whether restraint is still possible. The signal did not arrive dramatically. There was no explosion, no intercepted launch, just a deviation, subtle, technical, and dangerously open to interpretation. It appeared in the middle of routine monitoring, buried among normal traffic, easy to miss, and impossible to ignore once noticed. At first, analysts questioned the equipment. Sensors failed, transmissions glitched. That had happened before. Cold War systems were complex, stretched across continents, vulnerable to weather, human error, and imperfect calibration. But this signal behaved differently. It suggested coordination. Not enough to confirm intent, but enough to challenge assumptions. Timing aligned too closely with the ongoing exercise. Movements overlapped in ways that felt intentional rather than coincidental. Coincidence was losing credibility. The most dangerous signals in the Cold War were never definitive. They lived in ambiguity. They invited projection, and projection, under pressure, turned fear into logic. As the signal moved up the chain of command, it changed shape. What began as uncertainty became concern. Concern became warning. By the time it reached senior levels, the language had hardened, not because the data was stronger, but because the consequences of ignoring it were unbearable. Leadership now faced a familiar dilemma. If the signal was real and ignored, the cost could be catastrophic. If it was false and acted upon, the result might be the very war everyone sought to prevent. The Cold War offered no safe choice. The exercise complicated everything. Was the signal part of it, a response to it, or something else entirely unfolding behind the cover of routine? Exercises blurred reality by design, and now reality was blurring back. Communication channels were considered. Direct contact could clarify intent or expose vulnerability. A poorly timed message could confirm suspicion instead of easing it. Silence, once again, felt safer than explanation. Inside command rooms, posture shifted. Officers leaned forward, voices dropped, The atmosphere thickened as possibilities narrowed. What had been theoretical hours earlier was becoming operational. The night was changing tone. Readiness levels adjusted again. Nothing visible to the public, nothing announced, but enough to be detected by the other side's intelligence systems. Every adjustment echoed. This was how escalation worked in practice. No speeches, no declarations, just responses to responses, layered until intention became irrelevant. At this stage, leaders were no longer trying to understand the other side's motives. They were trying to ensure survival if understanding failed. The Cold War had entered its most dangerous phase, the moment when fear begins to outrun analysis. Not publicly, not officially. A question surfaced quietly. Are we reacting to intent or to our own assumptions? That hesitation did not stop escalation, but it slowed it just enough to create space for another piece of information to arrive. And that information would change everything. The signal had been interpreted for preparation for something far worse, but interpretation was not proof. In Part 4, new intelligence will force a reassessment and reveal how close misinterpretation came to becoming irreversible action. The new intelligence arrived without certainty. It did not confirm an attack. It did not deny one. Instead, it challenged the assumptions that had driven the night forward. Patterns once interpreted as coordination now appeared inconsistent. Timelines no longer aligned as cleanly as before. Doubt re-entered the room. Not everything was as it had appeared. Analysts began to reconsider earlier conclusions. Movements that seemed aggressive could also be explained as internal repositioning. Communications interpreted as command signals might have been routine coordination, amplified by heightened alert. Fear had sharpened perception, but it had also distorted it. This was the danger of assumption-based escalation. Once fear framed interpretation, every new piece of data reinforced the same conclusion. Contradictory evidence was not ignored. It was absorbed and reshaped to fit the narrative already forming. Assumptions became weapons. Senior leaders now faced a reversal problem. How do you slow escalation without signaling weakness? How do you reassess intent without admitting misjudgment? In the Cold War, credibility was as fragile as peace itself. Some advocated restraint. They argued that ambiguity cut both ways, and that acting on incomplete information risked triggering exactly what both sides feared. Delay, they insisted, was not surrender. It was preservation. Others disagreed. They warned that hesitation could be fatal if the threat was real. The Cold War rewarded decisiveness, not caution. History, they argued, punished those who waited too long. The room divided, not by ideology, but by risk tolerance. What made the moment unbearable was the absence of clarity. There was no definitive signal to obey, no unmistakable action to respond to, only probability, and the knowledge that probability was not certainty. Meanwhile, the exercise continued. Its final phases were approaching, each one increasing pressure on both sides. Stopping it abruptly could raise alarms. Continuing it risked confirming fears. Either choice carried consequences. This was the Cold War's cruel paradox. The very mechanisms designed to prevent surprise attacks, readiness, exercises, signaling, created the conditions for misinterpretation. Stability depended not on systems, but on judgment. And judgment was under siege. Behind closed doors, leaders considered a quiet option. Allow the exercise to conclude. Avoid additional movements. Send no messages that could be misread. Let time do what doctrine could not. Time, however, was never neutral. Every minute without escalation reduced risk. Every minute without reassurance preserved uncertainty. Restraint demanded patience, and patience was in short supply. The night dragged on. Fatigue set in. Decision-makers relied increasingly on instinct. Under such conditions, even small misinterpretations could tip the balance. The Cold War was now testing human limits. Then, slowly, the signals began to change. Movements stabilized, communications normalized. The patterns that had caused alarm began to dissolve into something less threatening. Fear loosened its grip. The realization was quiet, almost anticlimactic. What had felt like preparation for war was revealing itself as something else entirely. Coincidence amplified by expectation. The danger had been real. The intent had not. The night did not end with resolution. It ended with relief and unease, because everyone in that room understood the same truth. If assumption could bring the world this close once, it could do so again. In the final part, the Cold War steps back from the edge and leaves behind a warning that still echoes today. As dawn approached, escalation quietly stalled. No orders were issued. No forces advanced beyond posture. The machinery of war, primed for action hours earlier, remained in suspension. Not because the danger had vanished, but because it had failed to confirm itself. Sometimes, survival depends on what does not happen. Inside command rooms, relief was restrained. There were no celebrations, no declarations of success. The absence of catastrophe did not feel like victory. It felt like a reminder of vulnerability. The Cold War had tested its own limits. What made the night unsettling was not how close war came, but how ordinary the path toward it had been. No dramatic betrayal, no sudden collapse of diplomacy, just routine actions interpreted through fear. In the days that followed, official explanations were carefully worded. Exercises were described as planned. Signals were labeled ambiguous. Tensions were said to have remained under control. The truth was less comforting. Behind closed doors, analysts reviewed the night in silence. They traced timelines, reassessed assumptions, and quietly acknowledged how easily preparation had been mistaken for intent. The system had not failed. It had behaved exactly as designed. No doctrine was rewritten. No public lessons announced. The Cold War continued, unchanged on paper, altered only in memory. Those who had watched the night unfold carried its weight forward. Not the danger had never been aggression alone. It was symmetry, two sides acting defensively, mirroring each other's fear until escalation became automatic. The Cold War fed on reflection. That night proved a quiet truth. Peace during the Cold War was not guaranteed by treaties or weapons. It was maintained by moments of hesitation, pauses where certainty was refused. Restraint survived by inches. The world moved on without noticing. Cities woke, markets opened, ordinary life resumed, unaware that its continuation had depended on interpretation, judgment, and patience. History did not pause to mark the moment. Yet the conditions that produced that night never disappeared. Exercises still occur. Signals still overlap. Assumptions still form under pressure. The machinery remains. Technology has changed. Speed has increased. But the core danger remains human. How we interpret uncertainty when time is scarce and consequences are absolute. The Cold War did not end because it became safer. It ended because it outlived its balance, and because, by chance and restraint, it never crossed its final line. That night was one of many chances history was not guaranteed to receive. Wars do not always begin with intention. Sometimes they begin with assumptions left unchecked. The Cold War nearly turned hot that night, not because leaders wanted war, but because fear almost decided for them. This is how global conflict truly begins. Not with declarations, not with hatred, but with decisions made in silence and consequences the world never sees.